韩国的厌童症正
I've come across something quite concerning. The growing aversion to children that started in South Korea and Japan is now spreading to China. If you visit Korea, you'll notice that many shops and cafes have signs at the entrance that say, "No Kids Zone," banning children under the age of 12 from entering. At this point, there are already more than 500 cafes and restaurants in Korea with this policy. In Korea, this kind of intolerance toward children has practically become normal. What's even more alarming is that this phenomenon is now showing up in China as well. Many restaurants and cafes there are starting to explicitly ban kids under 12. And when you add in recent controversies like children crying on high-speed trains, it's clear that this rejection of children is not just an isolated trend. But why have so many people turned against children in recent years? Here are the main reasons. Children have become a symbol of anxiety and financial burden. They represent the high cost of education, which scares many young adults who haven't even had kids yet. Parents often shift that burden onto others. There are many cases of parents bringing unruly kids into public places without supervision, causing problems for everyone else, especially in restaurants. Modern economies promote individualism. People value privacy and personal space more than ever, and children, by nature, tend to disrupt that. Widespread exhaustion in hyper-competitive societies. People are so stressed and burned out that their tolerance for noise and chaos, especially from children, is at an all-time low. On top of that, with birth rates declining, people without children are losing empathy for those who do have them. It's a complex issue with deep-rooted causes, and instead of fading away, it seems to be getting worse. The trend of child aversion is likely to grow stronger in the coming years. If you're a parent, this may be something worth keeping an eye on.
To boost birth rates, Japan is taking a dark turn. Starting in April 2026, Japan will implement a new child support and parenting subsidy system. Sounds good, right? But here's the twist. This money will go to families with kids, yet it's being funded by taxes paid by single people. In other words, not having children in Japan won't get you arrested, but it will cost you. People are already calling it the no kids tax. Some call it a singles tax, but that's not accurate either, because even if you're married, if you don't have children, you'll still have to pay. This tax is tacked onto Japan's mandatory health insurance. If you want to work and make money, there's no opting out. You either have kids, or you use your own money to raise someone else's. And yes, it literally means you're helping pay to raise other people's children. Ordinary Social Security contributions are supposed to benefit you retirement, health insurance, unemployment coverage, and so on. But if you decide not to have kids, this portion of your payment never comes back to you. So yeah, you're financially supporting other people's families. That's the reality. And if you want to see extreme policies to push people into having babies, look no further than Japan. Calling it an incentive is being polite. In today's democratic and free societies, this kind of move feels authoritarian. So why is Japan so desperate? Let's go back to a report from June 2024 by Japan's Ministry of Health. That year, only about 686,000 babies were born. The fertility rate hit 1.15, a new historic low. Here's the problem. Japan originally expected the number of births to drop below 700,000 by 2039, but that threshold was crossed 15 years early. This is the kind of goal you never want to reach. The biggest consequence: rapid aging of the population and a shrinking labor force. Today, Japan receives more tourists annually than it produces babies. Small countries panic over population decline more than large ones, especially island nations with an ethnically homogeneous population. It doesn't take much for them to face extinction. Look at South Korea. Once the fertility rate dropped below 1, the country started spiraling into a national identity crisis. No hope, no future. That's why Japan has been trying to boost fertility for over 30 years. Since 1994, they've expanded child subsidies, opened more daycare centers, and tried to create a friendlier parenting environment. And since Japan doesn't spend much on military, they've invested heavily in population policy, more than they would on new weapons. But none of it worked. Birth rates kept falling. The population kept aging. And surveys showed something even more alarming. Nearly 1/3 of women born after 2005 said they don't want kids. Men weren't much better. By 2030, it's expected that 1/3 of Japanese men won't marry. 30 years of policy, and fertility continues to collapse. Meanwhile, Japan's economic engine is faltering. Key industries are slipping away, debt is rising, and tax revenues are falling. So now the government is out of options. They've shifted the burden onto people who choose not to have children. They've practically turned education into a civic duty and are forcing individuals to pay for a system they don't benefit from. Historically, this kind of thing isn't new. In ancient societies, marriage and childbearing were mandatory. Love had nothing to do with it. In ancient Rome, widows and divorced women had to remarry, or their families would be punished. The same went for feudal China. If young men or women of marrying age didn't tie the knot, their parents were held accountable. Under the Han Dynasty, women who didn't marry on time were hit with 5 times the regular tax rate. Throughout history, rulers understood this truth. National power is tied to population. When technology was primitive, human labor was national strength. Fewer people equals weaker country. But as civilization advanced, governments began losing control over birth rates. The more developed a country becomes, the less willing people are to have children. Industrialization alone is enough to kill fertility rates. In agricultural societies, families were production units. Large households meant more hands in the field, more strength, more survival. But in the last few centuries, everything changed. Women entered the workforce. They gained economic independence. They no longer existed solely to bear and raise children. Now, childbirth isn't a duty. It's a deeply personal choice. This is why the abortion debate has become one of the most divisive topics in American politics. One side says abortion should be legal. The other says it shouldn't. And here's where I stand clearly and firmly. If you're mature enough to engage in intimate relationships, you must be mature enough to accept the consequences. I do not support the idea of ending a life just because it's inconvenient. A child isn't a mistake, it's a consequence of a choice, and I believe that choice comes with responsibility. Of course, there are tragic exceptions, but in general, abortion has been used far too casually in modern society, and that's something I cannot support. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, things get even darker. South Korea used to criminalize abortion strictly. Until 2021, it was illegal to terminate a pregnancy, even in many difficult situations. Women who took abortion pills could face up to a year in prison or a $2,000 fine. Doctors could be sentenced to 7 years for helping. Even in cases of rape or incest, abortions were only legal before 24 weeks. Any later, and the woman would be forced to carry the child regardless of the trauma. And even now, with abortion technically decriminalized, South Korea makes it nearly impossible to access abortion pills or imposes extremely high costs on surgical procedures. The result? A surge in birth concealment, abandonment, and in tragic cases, infanticide. In one shocking case, a mother killed her 2 babies due to financial pressure and hid them in her freezer. She told her husband she'd had miscarriages. And honestly, the cost of raising a child in Korea is insane. Studies show that raising a single child to age 18 costs 7.79 times the country's per capita GDP, the highest in the world, higher than Germany. And yet, failing to register your baby only results in a small fine, about $30. So women are being pressured to give birth, but no one's holding the system accountable for what comes after. It's like the government is saying, "We'll force you to have the child, but good luck raising it." Once these extreme policies start, they're hard to stop. Japan and South Korea were early adopters of economic development and early victims of fertility collapse. The West saw it even earlier. 300 years ago, we fought for human rights. 200 years ago, for freedom. 100 years ago, for women's rights, including reproductive choice. Yes, governments want babies. But civilization can't be reversed. Childbirth isn't like manufacturing a product. It's not a supply chain issue. If you did treat babies like products, you'd have to slash dating costs, marriage costs, provide state housing, fixed salaries, universal daycare, standardized formula, diapers, nannies, school systems. Sure, birth rates would rise, but so would centralized control. And that's not progress. In fact, Real progress is when individuals can choose. Maybe one day, AI will create a world so stable and stress-free that people will want to have kids again. Not because they have to, but because they want to. And that not policy, not punishment, not taxes, might be the only real solution. Because love, not law, should be the foundation of life.